The United States is on the brink of the first Great Depression since the 1920s. It'll be a total economic collapse next year. It's going to be the Greatest Depression. A permanent Great Depression. It's wealth reset and middle-class destruction. We are on the brink of a really serious financial and, to some degree, even social and environmental meltdown, increasing income and wealth inequality. The pandemic was the tipping point that took us into an era of joblessness and poverty. Millions of people are jobless, many businesses are bankrupt, and the only winners are the stock markets and the banks. Global central banks are embarking on fresh waves of bond buying. Central banks step up $5.6 trillion bond binge. This is the worst economic crisis in the US. Yes, the central bankers are coming for what they left behind in 2008. We are spending trillions the way a drunkard spends his money in a rum shop. Unemployment is at the highest level since the Great Depression. The Fed will prop up the stock exchange with the last drop of the blood. Wall Street and Main Street have different interests. Wall Street represents the big corporations, big tech, and big banks, while Main Street is households, workers, and small businesses. What is good for Wall Street is bad for Main Street. The pandemic to cover up their looting of our entire Earth. It is not the pandemic that will drag us to depression, but the political response will. The way most big firms are going to survive and thrive and achieve the earnings target of Wall Street or the city is by slashing the costs. They will be slashing the labor costs, but your labor costs initially. But the labor costs for the corporations is the labor income and the consumption of the masses. The S&P 500 is going to newer highs because the big corporations are going to become bigger, while millions of small businesses, retail shops, small enterprises are going to go bust. The success of Wall Street is happening at the expense of Main Street. Those who are suffering are the workers, the consumers, the households, and small businesses. While the big corporations are becoming even more powerful, even more of an oligopoly with even more concentration of economic, financial, and of political power. There won't be any small and medium businesses with sole ownership anymore from now on. You need to work for multinational companies that run the government. More like the Indian caste system, of which we have the company elites that rule over us. Secondly comes the security, enforcer, judge, jury, executioner, to keep things in order. Thirdly, the workers to provide food for all. Lastly, the untouchables, who are the undocumented underground dwellers, a community of their own. Digital currency with expiry dates will be the norm. And unless we change our policies radically, we could end up in not just a greater recession like the one we had in 2020, greater than the global financial crisis. But we have the risk of greater depression, a depression worse than the one we had in the 1930s, and slavery. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. Many of you have asked me where they can buy silver and gold bullion. You will find in the description box the links where you can buy American Silver Eagle, silver bars, or rounds. I highly recommend that you start stacking some silver bullion for the future. American cities are in a downward spiral financially as the economy feels the impact of the pandemic. Even as some jobs return, each week, new jobless claims top 800,000, a historically high number. A stimulus bill that could help is held up in Congress and may not get through until after the election next month. Greed continues to destroy our home, Mother Earth. Wars, bombs, toxic rivers, oceans, and marine life destroyed. Tech debris in our hemisphere, forests destroyed. We're moving towards a humanitarian phase, and those who resist it will find it difficult to continue in its path of destruction. We're in the midst of a staggering upheaval, a culling of the precariat, an investment class that prays to its self-sustaining algorithm, a discordant political cloud where isms have lost meaning and where meaning searches for itself. The depression has been on for a long time, at its most. Watching everything happening in the world is like watching an unstoppable train come off the rails towards you. Everything slows down, and while you see it coming, there's no stopping it. It's just a question if you can get out of the way. The 1% who own most of the world is ultimately those to blame. They rigged the system to their own advantage. Through bribes and lobbyism over the last 50 to 100 years. The recession will continue for as long as the lockdowns continue. The reason they won't end it is that they don't fix the problem in the long run, and the stimulus checks end up in big companies like Amazon, Tesla, Apple, etc. The money will not help the bankruptcies, people unable to pay their mortgage, and unemployment. It will also cause inflation to the dollar, meaning everything from pensions to paychecks will be less worth. Austerity measures are nothing but an excuse for the ultra-rich to steal everything that the middle class had worked hard to gain. It's nothing but an excuse for the bank's massive theft of all the assets of the middle class. The capitalist system dreams of stimulus, massive printing of paper money by giving massive free money to the richest people in the world will never achieve any real growth. 2008 tried that, and look what happened. The government gave trillions of fiat money to the rich, expecting it to trickle down to the middle class. Instead, what happened is they used that gift of that money to buy back their shares, driving the stock market to boom and the middle class to become homeless. Austerity is nothing but the theft of the assets of the middle class. Any idiot that thinks stimulus or austerity will do anything but create a much larger wealth gap and bring on more draconian measures. Fear is how they control you. Increase fear-mongering, increase the national debt, increase homelessness and job loss to all, increase dependence on the government for money, food, and a roof over your head. Think sheep, think hard about these things. It is always a financial crisis. Never trust the stock exchange. It would be nice if for one day no one bought a thing. It would be a great pleasure to see the stock exchange, central banks, Federal Reserve, and elitists suffer like us useless eaters, serfs. Is the real economy still relevant? Look at the stock market. It cheers and soars with every bad economic data. The worse the data is, the higher the market goes. Since the Fed is willing to go low by unleashing unlimited liquidity and buying junk bonds to continue to prop the bubbles of everything from the bond to equity markets, so what, even if bankruptcy and unemployment surpass the Great Depression? It looks like value investing is dead. All those 401k steadily contributing, paycheck by paycheck, propping it all up. Like fractional reserve banking, but the fractional reserve of human labor trickling into 401k purchases. If most of those contributions are from baby boomers, then what happens when they leave the workforce and are not still net purchasers? Think towards mandatory distribution timeframes. When we have net sellers of stock, down she goes. A monster financial crisis is coming, but the plan is for the Fed and central banks to boost corporate-government partnership and then starve out the people, scare them into wearing a mandatory mask and receive a mandatory vaccine. The Great Rest is being pushed by the power in the US government. Owning a business, small business won't be allowed. People will be oppressed and starved. We'll have to sell the property then self to survive as a slave. People will be slaves. According to the Great Reset, the government will forgive all your debt. The catch is that you will forfeit your right to own anything in the future: business, home, land, vehicles. People will accept this deal by the hundreds of millions, if not billions, making themselves forever slaves with only the freedom their government chooses to allow them. Central bank interest rates are all very low at the moment to try to stimulate the economies of the world. Governments seem to have forgotten that the other lever they have is taxes. Governments could lower taxes to stimulate the economy. At low borrowing rates, this isn't as daft as it seems because repaying the current level of debt isn't as urgent as it once was. Because the cost of government borrowing is so low, the debts most countries are carrying will not cost them much or anything if the bank rates are less than inflation. Currently, we live in a world where punishing people and companies for being successful is seen as a good and virtuous thing to do. This is done by increasing taxes on everything that a few do-gooders can justify. It is also fashionable to try to regulate companies more and more so that their behavior is controlled into a narrow path that fits what a very vocal but small section of the population thinks is right. Again, more virtue signaling. The truth is that companies cannot operate in the highly regulated market and give good returns. Why? Because increasing regulation and the desire to hold companies to impossible standards has made it impossible for them to operate, grow earnings, and return profits to shareholders. At the current tax levels and regulation standards, it has made it unattractive to run a company. The virtue signalers out there who believe that companies should be taxed heavily and only allowed to operate under very restrictive conditions are simply missing the effect they are promoting. This constant corporate bashing and tax raising make everyone poorer in the long run, not just the wealthy that the virtue signalers hope to target. The end result is that a country doesn't have the money to do the virtuous things it wants to do, so they don't happen anyway. I have little confidence that the new administration will rush to lower taxes and stimulate commerce in the USA with lower regulation, quite the opposite, in fact. They will probably strangle the US economy as he tries to signal to the world how the third way socialism can save the world. And even if you wanted to go cash, there's negative interest on large cash holdings. It's actually not possible to do anything else than buy stocks. And all the printed money has the same problem. That's why evaluations don't seem to matter. If just some analyst somewhere spits out a random price target, stock hits it the day after. I actually thought price targets were a year out, not a day, but never mind as long as it all goes up. I long stopped caring about being an owner of a company. It's all a big joke, and it doesn't matter if they make toilet paper or rockets. Printing trillions and won't give their citizens a crumb. The Federal Reserve owns a massive amount of the housing market, something like 30% at the moment. And they have been pumping massive funds into Fortune 500 companies, mutual, and index to prop up this economy. It is entirely fake. According to the Department of Labor, we lost some millions of jobs permanently in the year 2020. Since September and December 1st this year, we have recouped a whopping 9% of the jobs lost due to the shutdowns. They can cheer all they want about having a 33% GDP, which means absolutely nothing if you understand what numbers encompass GDP. We are surfing on an entirely fake market as of right now, with only the federal government propping it up with newly inflated tax dollars. America is more corrupt than Venezuela and Russia put together. And you think the powers that be can't and won't prop up their own assets no matter what? That was the entire point of the QE, i.e., massive ongoing asset inflation for the wealthy and economic and literal death for the middle class. And now it will return, better than ever. Stock and real estate prices are perpetually supported by zero interest rates, while wage earners become weaker and weaker. Fentanyl and welfare for the middle class, more money and power for the elites. This dead GDP was always a feature, not a bug. It helps the globalists and our politicians' Chinese patrons directly in economic terms while it economically, socially, and psychologically cripples potential ladder climbers who might have the effrontery to oppose them. You serfs are going to have to get vaccinated in order to receive a stimulus check. If people don't see the timing of the stimulus conversion as being convenient, they're dumb. They pretended to not be able to reach an agreement for months, but they appear willing to work together now that they are rolling out vaccines. This was the Atlantis report. Please like, share, leave me a comment, subscribe. And please take some time to subscribe to my backup channels, I do upload videos there too. You'll find the links in the description box. You will also find a PayPal link if you want to make a donation. Thank you wholeheartedly to all those of you who have already donated. Stay safe and healthy, friends.